Hey, this is Alma Perez, vocalist and guitarist from Coatl, and you're watching Rock.
Alma Perez, welcome to Rocked. Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. My pleasure. I'm happy to be here today.
In August 17th, you're doing Festival Verano. You're going to Mexico. How's it feel to come back there?
It's amazing. Every time, we get to travel outside of the US, it's so much fun. We love playing here, but it's always just a little bit more special to play in a different country. So yeah, we're gonna be doing two shows, August 16 and 17, and we're really excited. They're gonna be really fun shows, and we're gonna be supporting some really, really great bands.
Now, in terms of your formative days, when when you grew up in Mexico, um, did it feature a lot of Mexican bands that you grew up listening to alongside the stuff that we're used to, like the British and American bands in the same way?
Yeah, I was born in Mexico. I was there until I was 7.
Okay.
So most of like my teenage years, my adult years have been here. When I was a little kid in Mexico, I would listen to a lot of pop, the pop artists that were popular at that time, and both in English and Spanish. So I wasn't really brought up with rock music. It was until later when I was in my teenage years that I started discovering rock music, metal, and I got into, both Spanish and, the English speaking bands that we're all familiar with.
And that's really cool. And it's cool to have that mix. And it's cool how you kind of let both those English and Spanish influences intermingle in your sound. So, what kind of American bands did you really um, grow up with in that regard? Did it start up rock and then gravitate to metal, or was it just all in, all metal all the time?
No, actually it started off with classic rock. My dad had a big collection of classic rock. He's a big fan of like the Doors, Creedence Clearwater, the Beatles, the Stones. So he started introducing me to that music, and I thought it was fascinating. He also liked Alice Cooper, so that kind of like started, the whole rabbit hole type of thing, because a lot of artists that were modern when I was growing up. Like, for example, like I grew up with Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson was huge, Rob Zombie. And these were guys that were saying their childhood idols were Kiss and Alice Cooper and Ozzy Osbourne, who were my dad's childhood idols. And so that's kind of how I got into metal, by first listening to my dad's influences, who were my idols, my future idols influence. So it's pretty cool. An interesting story on how I went from rock to metal.
Yeah, and those bands focus a lot on spectacle, and you do too in your music videos. And
Mm-hmm.
you have a very interesting thematic concept for the band. You and Isra Vega formed the band, and what year was it when you formed Coatl?
We met in 2000 when we were in school, and we officially started our first shows like around 2003. So we were really young. The first lineup was Isra on vocals and guitar, myself, and his brother on drums, and then we auditioned the bass player. So we were a four-piece, and our first show was back in like 2003.
Okay, so 2003 was when you guys formed. Now, the word Coatl is very indicative of your sound because it does um, pertain to evolution, and you throughout your albums, it's the kind of evolution that isn't abrupt, all in, like you start out raw and then you're like, wow, loud, like squelchy, overproduced kind of thing. It's like very, very gradual. And that's what I like about your sound. And again, I was really interested in the history, like of the band name and where its, origins lie. And were you always interested in your roots? Or like, was this something like discovering um, about like the Aztecs and the Toltecs? Was that something you eventually started doing over time?
So growing up in Mexico, but moving here very, very, very early on in my childhood, it was difficult because I wasn't considered fully Mexican because I only went up to second grade in Mexico. So my Mexican relatives were like, well, you're not really fully Mexican, you don't know our history. And then my American friends were like, well, you're not really American, you have an accent and you look different than us. So I guess just having that identity crisis or that void where you don't really know where you're from and you're trying to figure out who your people are, who your ancestors are, but also connect with this country that you've come into. I think that really sparked an interest into finding out where I came from. And then when I met Israel, he was at the time he was also an immigrant child, so he was studying a lot about like the Mexican culture, about the Aztecs, about the Mayans. So he was really studying a lot about that, getting into history, and then he started telling me about it. And together we started learning and really embracing our roots. And so when we started the band, we wanted a name that would take us back to our roots, and we wanted to put a lot of like pre-Hispanic noises and influences. We wanted the drums, the indigenous sounds, the flutes, and all of that. And so that's where Coat, which means serpent. Coat is a Nahuatl word. Nahuatl is the ancient language of the Aztecs, and so Coat means serpent, and the serpent is a really interesting animal throughout cultures, throughout mythology, throughout history. And so I think that's where we get a lot of our influence and our interest in everything historical and esoterical and and spiritual and all of that.
Yeah, and it's really cool. Like I was saying, your sound is very representative of what co-op means, like the serpent. And
Yeah.
when it came to, so in 2006, was El Despertar de la Serpiente, was that your first album, or was there material before that?
Prior to that album, we had two demos. So our first demo came along maybe like in 2004, and
Was it
then we
like a
had.
lot grittier than what was eventually on the 2006 album?
Oh yeah, it was, we were babies. We were still learning our instruments. One of the songs from that early demo made it into the album, and it's probably one of our most popular songs to date. Um, and but that very first demo, I think it had about 4 songs. It was very raw. We were very, very, very green. Our second demo was I think it was 5 or 6 songs. And that's where you started to hear a little bit more of the metal influence. That's when we started to listen to heavier bands. And we started to understand our instruments better. So then by the time we recorded our official first album, which is the one you just mentioned, we had a little bit more experience, and we were also evolving as songwriters.
And I really like how it starts out. It starts out with El Despertar. It's the first song, which is kind of like an interlude. And then you
Mhm.
go into Flor de Muerto, which is like, I like how when that song starts out, you don't like immediately just mimic what the bass is doing. You sort of kind of complement it with like the harmony of the riff as opposed to just, like I said, copying what the bass does. So, as the album progresses, you really it really shows like a good example of what your sound kind of evolved into. Again, we're talking about the
Yeah.
serpent, and admittedly, I haven't heard those demos, but I can tell that by this point, you were competent enough to have like full length material at this stage. It sounds like, even though you were just starting out, it sounds really solid.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess we just got lucky that we worked with a recording engineer and the producer that, they were really good and they understood and allowed us to manifest our vision. And the first song, El despertar de la serpiente, which means the awakening of the serpent.
Yeah,
Um, that track came about at that time when I wrote that track. I was a fan of the Beatles, and so George Harrison, of course, his big influence with classical Indian music and spirituality. So I
right.
was I was absolutely fascinated with Ravi Shankar and with what he did with George Harrison. And so I started learning about yoga and spirituality. And that's where that influence you hear on that album and that sound came from. And that eventually evolved a lot to at our current music where you hear the latest album, you hear the last track, you hear a mantra, you hear me chanting in Sanskrit, in English and Spanish. And that was literally the beginning of how our sound has been shaped with that spiritual and I guess Indian Middle Eastern influence with the Aztec tribal sounds. So yeah, it's interesting. I like looking back at our old material and analyzing and seeing how we've evolved and grown.
And I think you've involved in grown as a vocalist too, because 3 years after the first album, you go into El Llamado del Agua, and
Mhm.
like by that time your approach changes. You start like, alongside just singing regular notes, you start singing with kind of like a sneer. It's more like kind of snarky. And like, I like how it's not purely metal. I mean, of course, Isra screams to
Mhm.
sort of, you guys have like a call and response factor with one another, but both of your voices serve their own unique purposes throughout the music. And I think also, like, you can really hear, again, like, you really hear the subtleties in that growth. And that's what I really like. It doesn't like kind of jump out at you. It kind of encourages you to listen more, to listen in depth.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an evolution. When I recorded the first album, I was a little intimidated, and also when we recorded that album, it was a time when having females in the metal scene, especially a Hispanic female, was not that common, and so there was a lot of that macho culture where sometimes people would have certain expectations about a female artist, and so I would put up this front that I was a lot tougher than I really am. I would lower my voice. So that first album, I'm mostly singing here in the chest area. I'm singing a lower range. I really wouldn't allow myself to sing at my higher ranges, never my head voice. I would never go up there.
Oh
I
God.
was just, and
Like
it's so
Chris
sad,
Cornell
right?
back in the 80s, like with
Yeah.
full head
I was like, no,
voice.
no, no, no. I can't do that because it would be too feminine and it would just be too girly and I would lose credibility. This was all in my head as a young female artist. So I
Yeah.
would sing in much lower ranges. And then when El Llamado del Jaguar came about, we definitely we started playing with bands that were heavier, that were harder. and we wanted to prove that we were metal, that we did deserve to be there in those festivals and alongside those artists. And so that's where that snarkiness comes, where I thought, okay, well, let me sing more confidently, and let me try different things, and let me just, have that attitude I need. But then later on in the most recent album, I'm just, being free and really exploring my voice and letting me sing and enjoy it and just be who I really am. So yeah, it's definitely an evolution.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting you mentioned that because even throughout the 90s, you had like the surge of female fronted bands. I can think of like the more grungy acts like
Mhm.
L7 and Babes in Toyland and 7 Year Bitch. But then again, you make a really good point to say like female representation, especially, as a front woman, even throughout the 2000s, was kind of an anomaly because they weren't sure. Like, I mean, everyone wasn't sure, anyone in that position, including you, they weren't sure how exactly to conduct themselves. But
Mhm.
like you were mentioning, you sort of not only found your own voice, but you found your own disposition in terms of how you could not only front the band, but channel what you wanted to get out there. And for the record, like you can channel any quality you want, whether it is feminine or whether it is like sneering and like snarky. Both are like totally acceptable and both work in their own unique niches. So whatever you can do, it's awesome. And I think you in Shakti, you experiment with that freer range a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely um got very creative. I started singing in different octaves, different voices, different techniques. And so I'm really happy. I love this new album, and to this day I'm practicing every day, working hard to find my own voice and to just be free and really enjoy the music and what I'm doing.
Yeah, and when you compare the start of you guys like kind of figuring things out to how you are now as fully formed musicians, do you think like it's like the starkest contrast, like whoa, like when you listen back, you're like, why did we even pursue this in the first place? Or do you feel like even when you started, you definitely had something there?
I think we definitely had something there because everything we did it very passionately, and it was very sincere. So we
Were
never
you
tried
guys
to.
like always on the same page creatively? And
Yeah,
that's like a testament to your longevity in that sense?
I definitely think so. I think with, of course, throughout the years there has been many people in and out of the band. Only Isra and myself have been there as, constant. But I feel like the way we operate is it's kind of like a democracy. Everybody has their own place and everybody has their own voice. And so we try to practice a lot. We try to really connect and play off each other. And I think that's what makes the music what it is, and has given us this longevity, that we're very honest with our music, and we're very dedicated and passionate. And I think there's always been something there, and without Isra, I don't think it would be the same, and without me, it probably wouldn't be the same either. So that's what makes it special, that everybody who's been in the band has contributed something and has made it special in their own way.
Yeah, and the themes of Shakti are again, the thematic angle, I should say, is like again, sort of looking back to the past and just noticing how much stuff has evolved that you begin to question the way things are now, and you're like, how did it like end up like this? And so it's almost like the same reason why you started this band, to go to look back, and now you're doing essentially a very similar thing with Shakti. So it's like a full circle thing.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think with the first when we first started the band, we were looking for our connection to our roots and our identity. And then now we're looking back to try and find out like, okay, what's the next step? Where am I going? You know, how did I, like you said, how did I get to this point? And so yeah, so I it's definitely first full circle.
Yeah, I mean, with a song like Corporate Overlords, like it definitely speaks to the turmoil of like just what's going on now. And it's like everyone's trying to make sense of it. I'm sure you are. And
Mhm.
like it still comes across in a way that's like authentically, I guess, um you would say in a punk sense, because you definitely still have, even to this day, like a very gritty edge. It's not entirely metal, it's alternative metal. So
Mhm.
of course you have like more of like the grungy kind of, not entirely like spectacle driven and campy aesthetics, right?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think we have like an element of being very, I guess, polished and being very melodic and pretty, but then we also have that rawness. We conserve that that raw energy that we had from the beginning when we didn't really know what we were doing, and that's but somehow it still sounded good. I think we still preserve that where we don't really set any rules or boundaries, and we can go from being grunge to writing something that's very metal to writing something that's a little bit more, like you said, like more glam, like you get that Alice Cooper type of feel or that Rob Zombie vibe, but it's not fully camp. So yeah, it's a weird mix.
And you worked with German Visenyo and on Shakti, and compared to who you worked with in the past, what is it with this guy's approach that really sets things forward, that really gives these songs the life that they have?
So he's very, very, very creative and also very commercial. He's a singer, he's a great singer, great guitarist. He writes music for TV shows, for even for cartoons. I know he did music for Bratz, he did music for Trolls, for so many different things. But and so having him in that commercial aspect and how he understands how to write music that's catchy, that gets to you, that helps you get your message across, that was a really different approach versus our previous album, Samskara. We recorded that with Adasi, and Adasi is a total metal guy. He's an excellent guitarist, he's a producer, and he understands how to write for festivals. He's the one that showed us how to write songs that you can play in a huge stage, the call and response, how to write, how to get to the point, how to not to make these long intros that we were used to back in the days. He was like, no, you need to, you know, really get to the punch, get to within the first 10-15 seconds, you got to get people's attention. And so working with Atasi was more about making music for a large number of people, making music for a live audience, versus with Hermani was more about layers, a lot of layers, really capturing people's imagination and really finding our own melodic and commercial voice. So that's where like the difference is. So that's why Shakti is a little bit more polished versus our previous album, Samskara.
Yeah, in other words, it's one of them was capturing the attention, but
Mm-hmm.
then the other one is capturing the imagination. And both
Definitely.
of them could work side by side. You mentioned that when it came to the production tactics for Shakti, um, you really, or Sanskara, you can include that as well. Like a lot of that was what you knew already, but were you still surprised at what you were able to take away from those sessions and how much you were able to learn on top of that foundation that you set for yourselves?
Oh yeah, definitely. Pre Samskara, we were one band. After that album, we were totally different. We had a better sense of how to perform better live, how to conduct ourselves in front of a large audience, how to sing properly, how to be loud, how to play, how to make the most out of our instrument. So before, maybe we would be a little bit more basic in our picking and our strumming, with our the gear we were using. After Samskara, Adasi really showed us how to just sound better with the least amount of work, how to capture people's attention, how to like direct ourselves on stage, how to use a click properly, how to use backing tracks, which is something we wouldn't use before. We didn't know how to operate that. We didn't know how to create these intros, these pre-recorded intros, or have backing tracks with backing vocals or an additional guitar in case we needed just, to fill in the sound. So that's one of the takeaways we had from that album and working with Adasi. And then with Shakti, I think the biggest growth was my voice, because Herman is such an amazing singer. He really took the time to help me find my different ranges. He really encouraged me to learn how to sing different octaves, how to sing with a backing track. If the backing track is singing the high octave, how I could just do the low vocals, how I could even just allow myself to scream, which is something I would never do, because Isra, that's his job. But Herman was like, no, feel free to,
Eventually, you have to
like,
take the
yeah, he was like,
mantle,
feel free
right?
to express that aggression. I want you to scream. On one track on low, he made me sound crazy. He had me screaming and laughing. He's like, I want you to be like a maniac. I want this track to sound like you're literally losing your mind, because that's what the song is about. The song is about anxiety and depression and not being okay mentally. So he wanted me to sound crazy, and it was hard because I'm not used to that. I was so like limiting myself. But with Herman and his own creative genius, he figured out how to make me open up and allow myself to experiment a lot with my vocals.
So essentially, was character acting within your vocal range, within how you were singing, something like completely new to you?
It was, yeah, it really was. But for Shakti, like the Marilyn Manson cover we did of the love song, um, I allowed myself to just be a character who's in love, who's toxic, who is violent, because the song is about guns and violence and being obsessed and just dark. And so it was definitely a lot of role playing and allowing myself to get into character for some of these tracks.
Going back to like the technical process of, how the albums came to be, there's a lot of commotion about like, oh, that band uses backing tracks.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
should
It's
take them
it's
off.
something. Yeah.
But like, was there anything within the technical process that you had to come to a compromise on, or that you outright objected to? Like, nah, that's way too cheesy. Like,
Yes,
Nick, oh, there
totally.
was?
Oh
Tell me
yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
There
Tell me
there
about
was some of that, where Herman had really far out ideas, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Or no, I don't, or like even Anunnaki, which is, one of my
Yeah,
favorite stuff
Anunnaki,
in the
yeah.
album. So that song, I had to fight tooth and nail to keep it authentic. I literally sat down and cried and threw a fit, because Adasi wanted to change an aspect. He wanted to make it more metal, and he wanted me to change my guitar lines. And I was like, no, no, no. I wrote this, I recorded a demo, I sent it to you. I wanted to sound like the demo I made, but just, professional. And then he was like, oh, but this and let's change that. And I was like, no, we're not gonna change it because I had a vision. And then when it came down to recording vocals, oh my God, it was terrible because I really wasn't confident in the way I was singing it. But Herman had to do he had to like literally play note by note on the keyboard, show me the harmonies, show me the pitch. So yeah, it was hard. And yeah, there was a lot where we didn't want it to get too cheesy or too extreme or too overproduced because we knew it was going to be hard to replicate it live. We knew that there was no way we were going to pull out a sitar. And when we're playing live or when we're touring, like you could only take one guitar on the airplane. You're not gonna bring an acoustic and a sitar and this and that and electric drums. Like no. So that's
And
why
plus,
for the whole, okay, if we wanted to sound kind of like the album, we're gonna have to just do backing tracks. And to this day I don't deny it. When we're doing sound check, I'm like, yeah, play the backing track, play the sequence. I want to see how it sounds. And there's parts where you have like the vocals and I'm not singing, like for Corporate Overlords, like there's some where you hear like the pre-recorded track and I'm singing harmony to it, and it's obvious, but I feel like, well, I did record it. That is my voice, and we are playing live. Those are just elements. It's kind of like an ice cream sundae. Those are just sprinkles on top, but the banana, the ice cream, that's real and that's there. The rest is just sprinkles to make it sound more like the vision that we had.
it's a good analogy. And now that you think of it, you raised a very interesting point, one that admittedly I never thought of. So it's good to have you here. But I always thought because you see bands that are, maybe 20, 30 years past their prime, and they have albums with like, I guess, if you want to like put that in perspective, layers upon layers of guitars that they can't necessarily replicate live. And in so many instances, it's bound to raise a few eyebrows because, you get all these like music snobs saying, oh, they're just being lazy, they're still, they're making that money, that cha-ching, and they're like kind of checked out. But on the other hand, with a band like yours and a sound like yours, it's expansive to the point where if you were to actually like get extra, maybe even erstwhile members to replicate the sounds of the more traditional, varieties through traditional instruments, you couldn't, because never mind a sitar. What about like instruments that are made of wood and like that lose their tuning like so easily? Like
Yeah.
you
And
wouldn't
like,
be able to like, not only would that be like way too costly and that much of a burden, but it's so hard to replicate, live.
absolutely. And we do try as much as we can. Like for example, the violin, the girl who recorded all of the violin throughout all of these albums, whenever she's available, she will come and perform live. If she's not available, like she can't travel to a different country, she has to work, then people want to hear the violin. They are expecting to hear her lines. So instead of just trying to be super true and hardcore traditional, we don't want to deny our audience that beauty of the violin. We don't want them to be like, well, where's the violin solo or where's that melody? We want them to be able to enjoy it and hear it. And then same thing, I'm not going to carry a keyboard just to play the small little intro, like 369, that one song. If we want to include it as part of our set list, I can't carry a keyboard on top of all of the luggage and everything. And we don't have roadies. We're not at that level yet where we have a whole crew. Now, if we ever get to that label, I would love to. I would love to have an orchestra, just like Guns N' Roses, or have, a bunch of backup singers and dancers, and but when we do have the opportunity, We do have Aztec dancers on stage. We do have a violin player. We do have girls that are performing and doing these theatrics like you see on the Anunnaki video or on Low. We do have those ladies there putting on a great show, but
Yeah, it's
unfortunately,
amazing. I've seen
it's
that.
hard.
Like, it's awesome though. Like the end result when you're able, like
Mhm.
financially and emotionally and logistically to make it happen.
Yeah,
Like,
it's magical. It's beautiful. So in Mexico, these upcoming shows, we are gonna have Blanca, who is, well, she's gonna be playing bass. She's not gonna be playing violin, but we are gonna have an Aztec dancer, and the one who recorded on Shakti the last track, he's gonna be there and he's gonna perform. And then we also have a female conceptual dancer who's gonna be doing fire dances, and I don't know if she's gonna do aerial dancing, but she's definitely
god damn.
perform a couple of songs. So yeah, so we're excited that we're gonna have a good show, and we're gonna try to make it as awesome as we possibly can.
That's awesome. Not to just simply repeat what you say, but that is awesome, man. That is like amazing. Just the what you're able to not only um, produce, recording wise, but um, in a live setting is like they're both like of equal caliber, and I can tell that that's what you strive for. Now, branching off of that and a different topic, you make jewelry, right?
I do.
Um, Tell me a little bit about that, because I saw that you were listening to a band in one of, or you had a band's music in one of your reels, Masquerade, and so this Eternal Bliss jewelry, I really love the designs, by the way, the blues and the
Thank you.
the gold kind of colors. Like, how did that get started? And do you listen to music while you're making jewelry?
Yes. So Eternal Bliss, so you know how I mentioned that when I was young and I was into the Beatles, I got into Ravi Shankar because of George Harrison, and I started
Yeah.
listening to a lot of Indian music. I started learning about spirituality, and this was at a really young age. I've been obsessed with religion and spirituality since I was really, really young, since I was like 10, which is weird. I would go to the library and like rent books like on religion and on cults and on like all these like weird
Yeah, all
subjects
these
a little
10
kid
years
has
old
no
like
business
to be like,
reading, right?
what is she doing?
Oh yeah, it was just weird. I was like that one weird kid that could tell you, that could talk to you about the Bible and about the Quran and about
Yeah,
Kabbalah.
everyone's like
Like,
talking
why?
about
You're
like
only like 12. What are you
Spider-Man
talking
or
about?
watching cartoons or playing sports or
Yeah,
video games and like
yeah. So, so then when I got into like meditation and yoga and all of that at a really
yeah.
young age, um, that I got really into that, and I started learning more and more about all of these like spiritual topics and about different religions and stuff like that. And so that's always been part of like the music, about my aesthetic. And so in 2015 we actually took a break from the band. We stopped playing, and I was
Ah,
having just a rough time, and I really needed to get myself together, and I wasn't enjoying music anymore. I was going through like a really rough
that
period. Yeah, so
like
I
a
was like,
dry spell?
yeah, it was just bad. Like the chemistry wasn't there. I wasn't enjoying myself. Um, and so I just told the guys, like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I need to go on hiatus. You guys can continue if you want, or if you guys want to replace me, go ahead. But I really need to get myself together and
Oh, it
you know
was that it was
figure
that
things out.
bad,
It was
right?
bad, yeah.
Oh
So
man.
we totally stopped playing for 3 years. There was no Coatl for 3 years. And during that time, I went to India. I know it sounds cliche, but I did.
So I went to India.
And I got myself together. And so when I came back, um, one of my friends that I had met in India, she had the jewelry business. and she was selling it. She was gonna stay in India and do her thing there. So she wanted to sell her business, and the business, which was originally hers, was very successful. She was making, a lot of sales. She was very popular. She was a YouTuber, so a lot of people knew her. And so she sold it to me, and then I started making videos talking about my spirituality. And then the people who still remember me from the band, they started supporting, this little business. And I started making jewelry and all that, and making spiritual videos. And then in 2018, we came back and we started playing again. And ever since, music and spirituality and making jewelry and all of that has just come together as one. So yeah, so it's interesting. And so because everybody knows me as either from the band as, this metalhead, this musician, or from spirituality as the spiritual girl who makes jewelry and talks about different
The
topics.
eternal bliss girl,
Like, what? Yeah,
essentially.
so like eternal bliss is like my light, and then Coatl is my dark, and of course I bring them
It's all
together.
like harmonious in the end,
Yeah,
right?
so that's why in that video I'm making, you know, in the traditional Indian jewelry, but I'm playing metal because that's who I am.
And that's really cool. And would you say, um, after that brief hiatus, and especially now, you guys are a lot stronger in the bond you share, not only as musicians, but as people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So from 2015, the only person that didn't make it into the new version of the band was the drummer. But we always stayed in touch with our bass player. So nothing ended bad. Everything ended, amicably.
It
And
was amicable, right?
yeah, yeah. So with our bass player, we were still friends. We were still in touch. We would still see each other. We just didn't play anymore with the drummer because he was fairly new at that time. The drummer we had before, he decided to stop playing and dedicate to his family. And then so we had another drummer, and there was really no chemistry with him. And he was a great person, but we already had so much going on, and he was so new that it just, it wasn't gonna work out. But when we came back, our bassist came back, Isra, myself, Blanca, the violin player, she came back in the band. She had left years before. Um, and so it was pretty cool. And definitely when we came back, because we were all a lot more mature and we all had enough time to like really figure ourselves out and grow up. When we came back, it was all business, and we all had the same goal and we all had the same mindset. So it was pretty cool. And to this day, we're all in it because we want to be there, and we're all happy. We don't really fight, or yeah, we have disagreements, or we'll have different opinions, but it's definitely all very diplomatic and democratic. So it's pretty cool.
Considering your career that you've had thus far and all the trials, the tribulations that you guys have braved and, conquered in every extent, what have you learned about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person?
um I think I've learned that I'm very resilient.
Hell yeah.
It's it's hard to like to keep me down. And I think I just learned that, you got to be resilient, and you got to be self-motivated, because this is hard. You're not making tons of money. You're not, having tons and tons of adoring fans. It's like you got to work for everything. And a lot of the times you're funding everything yourself. You're promoting yourself. You're wearing many hats. And so I learned that I'm very resilient, and if I want it, I'll go through to any extreme to make things happen. And so
Yeah. Now, lastly, anything you'd like to say to your fans?
well, to the people who actually know the band, thank you for your support, and I'm really excited about everything that we're working on now. We are working on new music. We're already planning the next album. So I'm really excited about that. And to everybody that doesn't know who we are, I hope that this interview made you curious and interested, and that you give yourself, if you have the opportunity to check us out, listen to it, and hopefully you will enjoy our hard work and dedication.